Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
Okay. Bilal and Shaeeda?
Bilal likes to practice.
We're blessed.
Yes.
But he doesn't, I think after practicing, something should be there. Like, you want to see something, you know?
Right.
Okay, so Shaeeda is indirectly, in her way, which is often indirects, saying that she is upset at him for continuing to use birth control of some kind that isn't likely to result in her being pregnant. So she's upset. She's saying in this very indirect way, which we saw a lot of. She would do better to just, and maybe she has, but it doesn't sound like it, just say like, hey, so when are we going to talk about this? My guess is that, given her pattern in the one-on-one interviews, she just sort of drives it underground and slowly kind of is upset about it or stews about it and hopes that things will get better, but doesn't confront. Now, you could argue that she has tried to confront him, tried to bring up these various different issues with him directly, but he always finds a way to get out of it, and then it's a whole lecture, and so she's stuck.
We've been apart for so long. I'm like, let's enjoy each other for a little bit.
Yeah, how long is a little bit?
Like, 2 years.
Long.
That's long.
And year and a half, 2 years.
I'm 37, by the way, you know that, right?
So there's nothing wrong with what he wants. There's nothing wrong with what she wants. It's how do they talk to each other? How do they work it out? He's saying, which is totally understandable. Her point of view is understandable too. She's saying we're on a timeline here. He's saying we've been apart for so long that I want to enjoy our relationship. And there is actually some wisdom to that. Now, how do you calculate that with her age and this sort of thing? But that when couples wait a bit of time to have children, on average, things tend to work better, more satisfying relationships. Not always, you can get pregnant on day one and have things work out. There's a lot of variability in this, but on average, people tend to do better because, and it makes sense intuitively, that the couple will bond before they have the onslaught of having children, right? You create a situation where you feel like, okay, I really trust this person. We have a way of talking with each other. We've worked out a lot of our issues. Now we have our kids, and now we have a whole new set of stresses, and we have less time to actually bond with each other. And so that initial bond can carry couples through the lean years, if you will, so that you can say, well, I'm not feeling much love for my partner this, after you have kids, I'm not feeling much love for my partner this week, but I know that they really love me because we had all those years together. I have that inside of me to remind me that they love me. It's like I said, you could get pregnant on day one and have things work out. But so anyway, so Bilal is saying, that's what I'd like to do. Totally fine. She wants to get pregnant now. Also fine. How do they talk to each other?
You should remember the time. Yeah. You don't control time.
Yeah.
Well, and you never know how long after you really start trying it'll take.
Thank you.
My friend tried for years and years and years. And
you better start trying now.
We don't see eye to eye when it comes to this. He knows that. This is a very sensitive topic because he sees it one way and I see it a whole different way.
Yeah. And I will say that when you are the Bilal in the room, you tend to be attacked or criticized more readily than the Shaeedas. It depends on the circle you're in. But everyone in that room is saying, Bilal, like, come on, get with it. And I would say, stop, people. He's entitled to his wishes. There's nothing wrong with what he wants. There's even, like I said, some wisdom to it for both of them and for the kids, right? If the parents are bonded, it's a better chance for the kids. So there's nothing wrong with it. Now, again, there's a timeline, but he's talking a couple years. So 37 to she's 37 now. A couple years from now, she's 39. What's the percentage difference in terms of risk there for pregnancy? I don't know. I'm guessing that it's not drastic in terms of the contrast there. Now, I'm thinking for her, she's wondering, well, will it ever happen? This kind of thing. But how do they talk about it with each other? And from their pattern, I'm guessing he shuts her down and makes her feel small and stupid and discounted. And he has a long lecture about how he's right and how he's smart and how she isn't. And she just listens to it and doesn't know what to do. So if they had managed to talk about it in a different way, she might have a different attitude. She might have said something like, well, I wouldn't mind getting pregnant now, but, we have a plan and I'm willing to compromise with him. She's not saying that because of the pattern of their conversation. Now, the other possibility is that he has no intention to have another child, or doesn't know because for some people it's in the back of their mind they're like no, but the front of their mind they're like, well, maybe I'll give the idea that sure at some point, but when it comes down to the actual decision, the action phase of that, they're like, I don't, or they'll hem and haw. Well, we needed one more year. We just need I just need to get on my feet. We just need to, and 10 years later, you still don't have a kid, and you're just like, there was always an excuse when deep down the individual never wanted it. That could be happening too.
Bilal thinks having a baby, life stops.
No, I don't. I don't think that. You're taking the context that I'm saying differently. What I am saying is, when you do have children, the reality is that it limits you on some things you can do at that moment.
So, a different way, if I were to be working with him, a different way for Bilal to talk about this, instead of speaking declaratively, you would speak tentatively or personally. He said right there, no, you're taking it out of context. I'm just saying that when you have kids, it limits you, that kind of thing. Now, for her, for Shaeeda, she might be like, actually, it's the opposite. It frees you up to do all sorts of things, like love a child, Anyway. So Bilal could say, in my opinion, da-da-da. Or, for me, I'm worried about blank. I understand that you're not necessarily, but that's my personal worry. And maybe not everyone worries about that, but I worry about it. It's more personal, right? It's less debatable. And it doesn't belittle the other person. He's lecturing, he's in that mode. People tend to do that when they have insecurities, and they learned early in life, if they, one, push people away, belittle them, and have a very definitive way of speaking, then people won't push back, or they will get frustrated and kind of give up, that kind of thing. So that would be a little tip I would have for him.
When we first started talking, she mentioned she didn't want to have children. I actually convinced her to have children, because I do want more children, but...
Is that true? He convinced you to have children?
It didn't happen like that whatsoever. It didn't happen like he convinced me, because if he convinced me, it would have been easy for him, He didn't convince me. Bilal doesn't want kids right now, at all.
We're not talking about right now. We're just talking about children.
You didn't convince me.
Okay, all right, you're right.
Okay, so Shaeeda is sticking up for herself. I'm a little concerned about the way that they talked earlier when we saw, I don't know what, so when we do the tell-alls, when I watch them, the attention goes from couple to couple, and maybe with this series, I'll just say tell-all part 2, number 1, because usually I like to break it out by couple, but anyway, but earlier in this episode, there was a moment with Kobe and Emily in which they were disagreeing about how often they had sex, and they managed it pretty well. Emily was like, no, it was 2 weeks, and she's like, well, wait, has it been a month? And Kobe's like, well, let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's not get locked down on this detail. And taking care of each other, holding each other's hand, that kind of thing. For them, and I'll rewind this, the way that they're talking. Now, for many people, you could maybe understand where Shaeeda's coming from, that she has to be very firm and shut things down, because if she doesn't, he will bulldoze. And it's the only way she can get words out. But of course, it's not functional, because do we really think Bilal is listening and being influenced by her? I don't think so. I think he's just giving up and in his head thinking, no, you're wrong. Plus, his narrative is that, so he says at first, she didn't want to have kids, and I actually convinced her to have kids. That sounds strange, and Sean picked up on it, like, really? That sounds strange, but possible. And she's like, no. So it sounds like there's a somewhat of a nuance there. Like, if I'm guessing, there's something along the lines of where if Shaeeda hadn't been belittled and bullied and, been patronized to this whole relationship, she would be freer to be herself, which I think is more tentative, more reasonable. She might say something like, well, yeah, it's true that you introduced the idea in the beginning, and I had become a little demoralized about having kids because of my history, but I did want to have kids, but you did introduce the idea, but you didn't have to convince me. What convinced me was the fact that, oh, we're getting married, now we can have kids, now I can finally reinvigorate my dream of having kids. I'm guessing it's something along those lines, but what she says is she just shuts it down. She's like, no, you're wrong, in what I'm going to say, an aggressive way. He's very aggressive, way more aggressive than she is, right? Pulling the car over, belittling her, being patriarchal with her. But so maybe she's resorting to his style, which I will see happen with couples sometimes, which is not a great development. right? We could see why Shaeeda would resort to that. It's like, okay, if you're going to play that game, I'll play it too. But obviously, it's not a recipe for success or happiness.
You know, but
Is that true? He convinced you to have children?
It didn't happen like that whatsoever. It didn't happen like he convinced me, because if he convinced me, it would have been easy for him, you know? He didn't convince me. Bilal doesn't want kids right now at all.
We're not talking about right now. We're just talking about children.
You didn't convince me.
Okay, all right, you're right.
Yeah, there's so many little things in there that were opportunities for them to see eye to eye. There's probably some story there that he's exaggerating and she exaggerates in reaction to his exaggeration. Then the way she says it, like, he doesn't want to have kids at all, which isn't necessarily true, right? It's possible, but it's not what he's saying. He says he definitely wants to have kids and has wanted to have more kids, but he just doesn't want to have kids now. He wants to have kids in a couple years. So, and it's worrisome in particular because of the contempt in her voice that seems to be building. And I saw a little bit of this during the season, but maybe it's gotten worse in the interim between the end of the season and now. When we have contempt, when we are rolling our eyes, when we are having ideas of he just shuts, he never listens to me, she's always late, she doesn't care about my feelings, he is a cold-hearted whatever, and those kinds of conclusions are a milestone that began with conflict and misunderstanding and hurt feelings and fear and no way of communicating or being shut out or abuse or something. And then down the road, eventually you reach the town of contempt. And once you get there, it's really hard to come back. Because once you start thinking very judgmental, like it's normal in a fight to have those feelings. It's just like, she never thinks about my feelings. But then afterwards, when you calm down, to be like, well, it's not really true. But contempt is something that you establish as a foundation. Even when you're calm, you really believe this to be true. And that will erode love and bonding and motivation to be in the relationship and motivation to try to work things out. Because if she has contempt for him, then why would you try to work something out with someone that you've already decided is beyond the pale, right? Now, I don't know if that's what's happening for the two of them, but it is concerning. It will just add that to the list of concerns I have about them.
I just wanted to say, I don't think it was fair that Jabri said you guys went last. I think you guys will for sure last.
Aww.
And I see love and chemistry, and I felt really bad. I'm sorry that I didn't say anything in the moment. I regret that. I regret not standing up.
That's good that Emily says, I'm sorry for not standing up for you. And Kobe has soccer sandals with socks on, which is what I wear all the time, including right now. Except my socks are black, which is even worse.
I have a lot of money right now to do so. We have to be on our own.
We need to move out to get some space for our relationship. I mean, we got 2 kids right now, so.
You okay, babe?
You know. I don't know, I feel like here I am just thinking I'm this good guy, but it seems like everybody sees it different.
So I think he's hurt, and he doesn't know how to talk about that, at least on camera. It's interesting because he was quiet and has been quiet for a long time, and it was a long time ago when they were going after him and when she was voicing her opinion. And that'll happen sometimes when you have a relationship like that where one person has all the power, you get around other people, and the powerless person will be able to use the power of the room to finally voice things, and the power person isn't used to having things brought up. And I think we might be seeing that, and I'm guessing Bilal is going to suffer and has been suffering for a while. And I don't know, hopefully he'll learn something and adjust and say it hurt my feelings, or how do I need to change so that this will go better?
You know, didn't feel good.
I do know Bilal is an amazing person. Like, I will not travel all this way, almost 3,000 miles.
It's a good spouse to stick up for him, and that's great. That's good. But it also, I don't know, it just from what we've seen on the show, you just worry that because he is suffering, she can't tolerate that for one reason or another and is coming in to save him. Instead of maybe utilizing this moment as a helpful moment for her, but just like, okay, well, he's saying it doesn't feel good. And maybe you could think about changing some things about the way you talk or the way you think. Maybe you should go to therapy. Instead it's like, no, you're an amazing person. And yeah, but maybe for her it is, well, on camera, I don't want to throw him under the bus, but as on the drive home, I'll be like, so did you think about what was said? I don't think that's going to happen given the pattern, but I don't know.
To marry someone that I think is not fit to be a husband. These little things that get into a relationship, if we don't deal with it now, it could fester. And when I look at, after I hear Shaeeda, it looked like they never dealt with that. And it probably reached that point where she was like, oh, I can't take it anymore.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that was my hypothesis. And I'm glad she's able to think that, or at least hypothesize. Does he understand that? Can he say, yeah, well, maybe I do need to change?
But so now I want us to not make that same mistake. That's all. We identify what is the problem and we can work on it. And listen, I'm willing to work on it as your wife. I'm here with you. But if...
Yikes. So she's doing everything she can. She's working so hard to make him feel better while also not completely throwing herself under the bus. She's sticking up for him, but she's like, look, we all have problems. I'm willing to work on it. Are you willing to work on it? I don't want it to fester. And then silence, stoicism, anger, rejection. I won't participate in this conversation. Now, maybe it's just because I'm on camera. I don't want to come across like a fool or something. And on the way home, sure, we'll talk about it. Hopefully that's the case.
If I stay silent, it could turn out to be like your last marriage.
Wow, that was powerful, what she just said. That was powerful. And yeah, that's what I've been thinking this whole time. That's a very concise way of putting what I've been yammering about this whole season, or at least at some point when I started to see the pattern where she would seemingly see it for the most part, bring it up, he would react like this, and then it would just go away. And then the next time it came up, she would approach it again, and it looked like this, or he would lecture her, and it would just go away. And what she's saying now is, if you push me into silence with your control and your patriarchal way of talking to me, belittling way of talking to me, your rigidity, then this will just end up like your last marriage, where I just can't take it anymore and I walk away. In his mind, though, I think given his relational traumas, he's so hurt right now, and his way of coping is to avoid and to try to salvage some self-esteem, some self-worth. And this is how he's choosing to do it. I don't think it's helping in the end, right? And he's so terrified of loss. He's so terrified of being abandoned. And then for her to say, essentially right now, I might leave you, is just salt on the wound for him. Now, from the outside, we're like, Bilal, talk to her. Say you'll change. Say you'll work on things. Say you understand. Don't just sit there or lecture her later. But when you're hurting, you'll do a lot of things to defend yourself.
We identify what is the problem and we can work on it. And listen, I'm willing to work on it as your wife. I'm here with you. But if I stay silent, it could turn out to be like your last marriage.
Ugh, just breaks your heart, doesn't it? Just breaks your heart. She just seems like such a good person. She's trying so hard, and she's being the dutiful wife. She's doing everything well. She's defending him. She's doing everything. She's trying. She even admitted to people in the family that, yes, I am overindulgent, or what was it, like I do ask for too much, or I am stubborn or something. I'm like, you're the stubborn one? And all the efforts she's putting into it, and then she just gets this. Now, we don't know, maybe behind closed doors he's a ball of affection and listens all the time, and he's great behind, away from the cameras. Or is it just more of this and even more intense lecturing? I don't know. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.